think it affects me also as a citizen of now the United States, and it is very disconcerting to see because of course I am an immigrant, so it's awful to experience this hateful rhetoric against migration. And as Zoran Mamdani said, it's a country made by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as he said, New York City is now a city led by an immigrant. But a lot of the news that we're reading about, I see outside my window because I live in a very immigrant neighborhood full of immigrants in New York City, Jackson Heights, which is one of the most diverse neighborhoods, and the most languages spoken. And I consider it a great privilege to live there. There's such extraordinary stories from all around the world. It's a meeting place for so many different people. It's such a vibrant place. And I could see a lot of that vibrancy subtracted and a lot of fear. And that is what disconcerts me the most is the entry of fear into the landscape, because I know that when it comes to democracies that it's sort of the beginning of the end when people are too scared to speak and are staying home, and there's an atmosphere of fear. But then you have to also talk about that in an Indian context, and there's been a lot of anti-migrant immigrant rhetoric in India too, and a lot of fear here as well. So one has to see it also in global perspective. It's happening everywhere. It leaves migrants and minorities feeling very vulnerable, and certainly the Indian diaspora too. I agree. I think the vocabularies overlap. Migration, translation, many perspectives, a sense of moral ambiguity, fluidity, and migration and artistic language also, it's very compatible. As an artist, you're also constantly occupying different worlds. You're very aware of competing ideas, contrasting ideas. So in a way, being an immigrant, it's a wonderful thing to be both an immigrant and a writer. And loneliness, solitude is again very compatible to an artistic life. And it's also absolutely an essential part of the vocabulary of immigration and migration. As I said, it is very disconcerting, and there's sort of been a rise of anti-Indian hate, hasn't there? There's been in many parts of the world. There's been a rise in racist attacks. But you also have to remember when COVID happened, there was a Chinese community in the United States felt very vulnerable, and then the ground sort of shifts under your feet, doesn't it? Because you think you've immigrated to a country, and then all of a sudden you lose that little sense of belonging that you were beginning to develop. On the other hand, looking at it from another, I think it's also a real lesson to all of us in how we see the country left behind as well. I think a lot of the Indian diaspora was very counted on a secular democracy being intact in the United States, but was not so concerned about it in India. So now I'm wondering if this is a bit of a wake-up call, which would be a good thing. I mean, this may be a real lesson in empathy, I think. I think that's always been the case, that people want, that countries want a simple narrative. They want one book on the shelf. So perhaps there's a desire for authors to produce that single narrative, and yet I think artists really count on a syncretic landscape. That's what's interesting and exciting. There's a wonderful talk by the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Adichie called The Danger of the Single Story. So I think my literary landscape, I will just say, that has been so enriched by the fact that I was born in India and I experienced that syncretic culture. And I think that is the secret of the vibrancy of the Indian literary landscape. Thousands of stories. I think in my book, The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, a character says in India, stories grow on trees. And you can access so many different philosophies of so many different religions and people, places. And in the same way, the United States has been a very vibrant literary landscape because there are people from so many parts of the world mingling there. And that is also now a little bit under attack because books are being taken off the bookshelves, as we know. Well, I'm so glad he's young and has the confidence of youth and will speak out against Trump's policies, will speak up for immigrants, minorities. It's really a wonderful thing to see, that not to demonize. There seems to be no respect for the immense amount of work immigrants do. And when I look around my neighborhood, these are people who work all day and all night. The subway is never empty. There are people coming home at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. It's crowded. So I'm so proud and happy that we have somebody from our part of the world, in fact, half from our part of the world, half of him, who's speaking up for us.